All right. So first of all, definitely big, huge welcome goes out to you. None other than Richard Christian Matheson, who certainly is a man who probably doesn't need a introduction to most of our Cemetery Dance viewers. But of course, for those who have spent most of their days under a rock, way before social distancing was the norm. RC, of course, is the master of minimalism. I've got what I think about a couple hundred published short stories out there, which can often be found in a lot of the year's best of anthologies. I know you're, of course, an accomplished screenwriter with numerous film and television credits to your name. You've also, of course, are the editor of Battleground, the making of book about one of my favorite Stephen King adaptations. Uh, that you wrote that stars William Hurt. I know that one, of course, you did The Unthinkable, and you made a movie without a single word of dialogue. And probably, RC, I'm going to say that probably the most important thing that people need to know about you is that you're also having to be one of the kindest, most generous, creative forces that I personally come across in the business.
Oh
Did
my
I
goodness.
miss anything
Well,
there, RC?
well, my goodness. I thank you. I'm honored to be here with you, and that's very kind of you to say that. And thank you so much. I'm glad you love Battleground. That one, it is a rarity to do. It's really a rarity to do a screenplay with no dialogue. And then, it went on. It won 2 Emmys. And so my joke was always I was going to be hearing from all these other producers, and they would say to me, "Listen, would you do a rewrite on our script like you did with Battleground? And I could just take all the dialogue out of it. Boop, that would be my rewrite." So, but I mean, it William Hurt really made it come to life, and then Brian Henson, who's Jim Henson's son, he just did a brilliant job, and so I'm very proud of it. We're all really proud of it. It turned out fantastically well.
Yeah, it's an incredible achievement.
And I know you're a big fan of it.
Huge fan of it. Yeah, I really loved, like you said, what William Hurt does. I've never seen anybody steal a scene simply just staring at a box, eating a bunch of cashews, and that's it.
Yeah.
Just 2 minutes of absolute
I
suspense.
remember the executive producer, a guy named Bill Haber. I was working on a different show. I was producing this other show, and he came to the set to say hello to me. And I said, "How are you, Bill?" He said, and he had just come from the set of Battleground. He said, "I just spent an hour on the set watching a man open a box." And he said it was the most galvanizing experience I've ever had. So, I mean, it is fascinating to watch it. I mean, to just watch, and of course the angles you can, you watch her go, so it was a triumph of Brian's direction and William just finding strange little reactions to things. So
Yeah, I've watched it several times with friends of mine, and often I'll remind them near the end of the movie. It's like you realize that nobody said a single word in that whole movie, right? And they looked at me and they
yeah,
have
some people don't notice it until it's all
right.
over with. And even when it's done, they don't realize it. And then you go, it's kind of shocking. You would think they'd pick up on that it would become kind of obvious after a while. But there at one point somebody was saying we should turn it into a movie because it's an hour, so you add a little bit of this, a little bit of that. The trick though would be to maintain that extremely. It's not just a spare aesthetic; it's a very particular aesthetic, no dialogue. So you'd have to do that from the beginning. I think there's a way it could be done. So who knows? Maybe we'll do it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. RC, one of the things that I did want to talk to you about, of course, was a book that I recently read, book by John Shirley, who a lot of folks may not know who he is, but they probably know his work. He has numerous novels out there himself. He's stars in his own punk rock band. He's written lyrics, I know, for Blue Oyster Cult. He's a screenwriter as well, co-screen wrote some of my favorite movies, including The Crow. Um, Picture for anybody that wants to see that, The Feverish Stars, which I don't know if you can see that, but of course this is introduction by R.C. Matheson.
Yeah.
Before we get into the book itself and your introduction as well, if you don't mind walking us through, how did you first come to know of John Shirley and his work? How did that
Well,
come?
I knew John. Yeah, I mean, John's quite a Renaissance character. There's a group of guys that I have known for a long time, like Craig Spector and John Skip. We had a band together. Craig and I actually were in another band that we did an album with our friend PG Sturgis, and I had heard, and also David Scow and I have been friends for 500 million years. And so I had heard about John, but John lived out of LA, so I'd never met him. And we obviously had a lot in common. I mean, not everybody in horror has music in common. Stephen, by the way, plays music, and I played drums in Stephen's band which was kind of a wild experience. I'll tell you about sometime. And by the way, just parenthetically, a person who is a drummer, and people will probably find this very surprising, is Dean Koontz. And so there you have it. But so I just reached out to John and I said, hey, next time you're in LA, we should get together. I think we got a lot, we have a lot to talk about, and so we did. We had a really wonderful lunch. We compared, insidious notes about life, and we just became, very fast friends. And we ended up at one point, he jammed with my band, and which was, a complete blast. And above and beyond all that, just the chemistry of us, and that we have so much in common as writers. Socially and politically, we see eye to eye. He's a very politically minded and very incisive voice about things that are going on in the world. So I also really, I relate to all that with John.
Absolutely. And I know as far as your introduction goes too, when I was chatting with John, I'd asked him, of course, how the introduction came to be, and he tells that it was as straightforward as he asked you, you agreed.
That's
is it
pretty
that
much,
straight?
that's actually more complicated than it was. Yeah, no, that was really it. John had written a introduction, or he did not an introduction. He referred to it as a few remarks from an admirer, which is even better than the word introduction, from my collection, Zoopraxis. He did that, and then Chet Williamson did an introduction, and so when the Feverish Stars was being put together, he asked me, and I said, "Are you kidding? Of course, I'd be honored."
Awesome. And when you're doing an intro, maybe it's a little bit different because you were acquainted and friends with John.
Yeah.
Do you have any sort of, I guess, criteria or anything that you factor in whenever? I'm sure you probably get all kinds of requests. You probably have some sitting in your inbox right now, I imagine, asking you for introductions or even act words, things like that for other people's bodies of work. Are there certain things that you factor in when you decide yay or nay or not now?
Well, yeah, I mean, I do. People do ask me to do it, and it's really simple. I just have to really feel a connection to the writing. I have to just really feel, I have to. It's not just admiring the writing, but I have to feel that it resonates for me. So, over the last few years, I've written one for Clive, and I just wrote one for Frank Darabont for his book. Wonderful writers. I wrote one for Chet Williamson, also a fantastic writer. And so it starts with my having been aware of them all for many, many years, and also just realizing how much their work has not just affected the genre and affected so many writers, but how it has personally resonated for me and with me. And so that's it. I mean, there are writers that are very talented that reach out and ask me to do one, it's not, it just isn't. It's not my cup of tea. It's not that they have any lack of talent or anything like that. I don't look at it that way. But so it's kind of like that,
Okay.
Yeah,
Sounds like you have to feel like the book is a part of you before you opt in to be a part of it.
yeah, because otherwise I feel like I'm just sort of endorsing something, and it's not about endorsing it. It is about saying, this is why I've been moved by this, and and maybe you will be too. But it's not about me just lending, just lending my presence and hoping that will do. And I think in some cases I don't even know what introduction quotes and all that stuff bring to a book. I'm not even sure. I mean, that's been debated, you know. But I do personally feel that I have to genuinely love it, you know, and that I can't just. I'm writing. I just wrote something for a very fine author in Mexico, Sandra Becerril, who's got a new book that just came out, and I also wrote one for a friend of mine who doesn't write in the genre, Fief Sutton, who is a noir writer, LA noir, kind of that vibe. And you know, it's very funny and wicked, and so you know, when it really touches me, I'm drawn to wanting to do something.
Okay.
Yeah,
Now you did, of course, mention a little bit about the things that helped you and John Shirley come together as friends. But regarding his creativity, outside of the band, what were your
yeah,
first impressions of the way that John approaches his craft writing and about the stories in general in the
yeah,
Fevers?
me too. Well, I had a lot of reactions. You know, I felt, you know, I had read John's work over the years, you know, so I was not a stranger to his work at all. And I always thought he was instinctively, um, not just creatively, but instinctively exploring ideas at pretty complex levels. You know, he was a guy that was perceiving their their many implications, not just in what he had designed, but in the essence of what he was writing about. And he was also philosophical and social, and as I mentioned before, he very politically minded, so he could be very scathing in a very, you know, with great wit about things that he thought were hypocritical. So he was a guy and is a guy who's a serious thinker and has a lot on his mind. So he brings from, you know, what I love about John. There's many things I love about John's work, but there's a humane insight. There's a kind of a biting cynicism, and you know, from the earliest time, he's been eclectic, of course, and edgy, and he's just a very fine writer. And so it's a rare brew of things that he brings to it, and he's unflinching. And I guess ultimately, what makes the work really, you know, really have a lasting quality is that there is a transformative point to it all, you know. And so whether he's being bitter in an entertaining way, or damning, or he's being transcendent, he's capable of all of those, and all of those in the same story, remarkably enough. But there's always a point. There's a point, and there's an important point about what he's talking about.
Yeah, and that in itself is a really good point. I know when I read this, especially this collection too, I did find very much that it was very there's a very transformative. I mean, I think in top of my head, every one of the stories, the way that the characters start, even the ones that are only a few pages, they were not the same at the end of that story.
No, they're like they're almost novelistic in a weird way, you know, in that they don't just have a sort of a trapdoor ending. They don't just have a kind of a quick, you know, very hypnotic little arc to them. There's more going on. There's more going on because there's so much going on in John's mind, you know, so there's no way John can avoid there being so much going on. That's just who he is.
Right. And more towards excuse me, when you're I know when you were reading it as well, it was there um, specific anything in particular that you're most excited to try and convey when you're writing your introduction as well, which I thought was amazing. You touched on every story,
Mm.
certainly much more eloquently than I could have done, and you really captured. I mean, you are the you know legendary minimalistic writer, and you really captured so much about the stories in such a little bit of space. But was there anything that you're most excited to try and convey when you read the book and then started out to write your introduction for each of the stories?
Yeah, I was just thinking my ultimate, at some point, my ultimate introduction will be like the Battleground, there will be no introduction. It'll just be my name, and people will go, "Ooh, must have really loved it." Yeah, I mean, I've already talked a fair amount about the aspects of John's talent, but I wanted to, I wanted to convey the intricacy of what he does, the beauty of what he does, and it's all it's unnerving and it's disturbing, I mean, and it has great poetry, but it's also very dark, almost to a story. I mean, certainly some are considerably darker. I mean, none of them are not dark ultimately. And there's with John, there is that kind of just X-ray depth with his observations, his characters, his dialogue. So it's a lot to try and convey in an introduction. I tried as well as I could to touch on, those different parts of John's talent.
Well, I think you definitely nailed that to the T. That's for sure. And I know.
Well, John loved it, and that was the important thing to me. I wanted him to feel that I had done him justice, because that's what he deserves.
Right, and I know I've been on. You mentioned before about how there's debate on the importance or the value of an introduction after that sort of thing to a book.
Yeah.
Especially when it's, I guess not a third party, but a second party. It's not the creator itself that's doing it. I've been on the fence about that myself from time to time, but I find that I think the job of a perfect introduction or a well laid out introduction was essentially what you laid out, where you read it and you're really excited to read the stories, to not just to see if they hold up to the hype that you created for them in that introduction, but more so that I can experience the same things as well that you laid out in the introductions. And I found that as I'm reading each story, it definitely wasn't let down. I found that in many ways I was kind of comparing your thoughts about the story to my own thoughts. The reason I love to read reviews after I've already enjoyed a book or a movie and that, just so you can kind of, have a bit of a collective conversation about it, if you will. Of course, this conversation is unchanging. It's in the book, but it was really cool the way that I was able to compare a lot of my own feelings and thoughts about the book with your introduction, and it's worth rereading as well.
When you're writing an introduction, these are sort of some of the feelings I've had having written a bunch of them. You're number one. I think it's not the job of introduction to deconstruct anything, to critique anything. God knows, it is a celebration. It is a celebration, and it is a it is a great sort of not just toss of confetti, but a real a real kind of absolute validation of this person's vision as a writer, and I think, with short stories, you can talk about the effect of them in this genre, because they have to have an effect. They have to have an impact, and whether it's a trick ending or it's a weird, troubling, inverted ending, whatever it is, it has to have a really cool ending, or they don't really have a lasting, sort of value.
Right.
With the readers. And so you can talk about that, but I think with when you're dealing with certain authors, and I've written about my father as well, of course, and Charles Beaumont, that it's irresistible to me to not talk about what the process is, sort of the subdermal thing that's going on with the story, and who they are and what they're bringing to it, because there's not one story in that book, in John's book or in any of our books, that another writer couldn't do a pretty okay job with, but it would be an entirely different story because of what the writer's bringing to it. So John's not only bringing good ideas for stories, great ideas for stories, it's how he's telling it. And so with an introduction, to me, I'm more interested in talking about the telling than I am about revealing what the story is, because that should be discovered by the reader.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, just describing, especially in the different aspects, like you said, the layers of that John works into even a story of only a few pages it's worth the surprise, 100%.
And that's why if you don't feel it, it's hard to write an introduction. It becomes ultimately, you're drawn to superficial observation because the writer has not sort of invited you deeper, at least according to your own reaction to that kind of writing.
Right. Yeah. I think you'd be looking at more kind of, I don't know, mechanically as opposed to the creatively and the creative
Yeah,
aspect.
yeah, for sure.
I know when you were part of the stories that you were touching on too, it's kind of neat because most of the introductions, especially when it comes to any kind of collections or anthologies, uh, usually shy away from saying, "Hey, this is my favorite one," because
Yeah.
get out of my way. I'll decide which one's the favorite one here. But of course, you did mention that your favorite one was a dedication to the memory of Harlan Ellison called "When You Called Us," or "And When You Called Us, We Came to You." Um, what struck you about that one more so than all the other ones? I mean, it's a tough crowd to pick a favorite out of.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I love all of them. It is some of John's very best writing, I think. I mean, it is this kind of like exquisite hallucination, you know, and it's almost it's not impossible, but it takes, you really have to be um, able to do it at a level John can do it, to blend the magical and the horrific, and end up with something that is quite literally um, splendid, you know, sublime. I mean, that's really what he did with that story. And it's about Halloween. I know you've read the story, and it's about, malignant spirits, and they come and they seek us and they bring harm. But it's also about the human heart, and it's and how conflicted things are. And I don't want to say too much because I don't want to give it away. But I remember saying in my introduction that it was because of the kind of the magnitude of it, even though it's in a small setting, that and how disturbing it was. I remember saying that it was all sort of like viscera and opera, and that's what it felt like to me. It was like a sort of a small scale opera in the best possible sense of what that can mean. And it's really it is my favorite story. I think it's brilliantly written, and and it's very it's haunting. It's haunting, and of course that's exactly what John intended. But boy, did he pull it off!
Right, absolutely, and that's what some of my favorite stories in there was as well. As I found that there's so many of them that they just stick with you, and
Yeah,
really, unless you're reading this as you're, I don't know, driving down the freeway with too much other things to try to think about, which you really shouldn't be doing, it's almost impossible to not look back and reflect on some of the stories as well, just because, like you said, there's
yeah,
so much there, there's so much relatability to kind of
yeah.
forces you to really look at things. And I think some of my favorite parts in some of the stories too, where these scenes that were probably no doubt, if they really happened to you, are absolutely tragic and just in some cases grotesque and really horrific that you can't, at least for me when it's pictured in my mind and kind of thinking back, I think, wow, that's just the landscape of that scene was just absolutely gorgeous, and
Yeah.
there's so much beauty in that, and even some of the really horrific, terrible scenes that he would write. There's a lot
It
to kind of
starts with it all. I mean, clearly, with all of us, all of us that are writers, it starts with who we are.
right,
The way we write, and the way and what we think, and the observations that we bring to what we're doing. And John, as you said earlier, he's had a very rich, very interesting life, and he brings um, the full sort of freight of all of that to what he does, and the awareness that it has brought to him. And so each story is not just the story; it's also it's John Shirley. It's
yeah,
John Shirley, and if you look at David Mamet, it's not just what David Mamet writes, it's the way David Mamet thinks. And so it goes. That's the same thing with my father, Stephen King. It is the person that is manning this particular creative tale or novel or whatever it happens to be.
yeah.
And that's why it's particularly upsetting to realize that I wrote something with no dialogue. What does that say about me? I need to go and get a brain scan or something.
some kind of mad genius, apparently. 'Cause
Yeah, it's got to be mad genius. I'll take that. Yeah, it's mad genius. That's what it is.
oops, got an Emmy. A couple of them.
Yeah, yeah.
And speaking on who you are and who John Shirley is,
Yeah.
and drawing that line down the middle, which is hardly a divide, but it's more of a parallel anchor to the two of you, especially with some of the similarities that you touched on. I don't think it's that crazy of an idea to think that, at least it made me wonder that maybe down the road, I don't know if there's some sort of a collaborative plan, or that the two of you might collaborate on some sort of a creative endeavor together when it comes to words. I'm not sure if that's something that's
Well, nothing yet. We certainly have flirted with different projects and talked about different things. And, I mean, it just seems like, I don't think it would surprise either one of us if that weren't to, I mean, we'd even talked about it with music, by the way,
yeah.
but it makes it slightly trickier, only a little bit these days because of Zoom and all of us socially isolating anyway. But, we're John in Los Angeles, it would be easier to do the musical part of it,
Right.
for sure. Or if I was living where he is, but certainly on a creative level, we resonate with one another, and we both write scripts. That's a big part of my life. Obviously, that's probably that's the most prolific part of my life. If you get right down to it, I think I've written almost 1,000 scripts. So it's crazy for me to. I mean, I can't even believe it. But what are you going to do?
Yeah, and I mean, some of the favorite ones that I remember watching when I was a kid, I'm sure a lot of people grow up or have grown up just like your dad, that are like, oh, he did that. I had no idea. I remember when you and I chatted, when we first got acquainted with each other, RC.
Yeah.
We were chatting about 3 O'Clock High, and I mean, I loved that movie when I was a kid, and I was surprised, when I found out, oh, you wrote the script to that. That's so I had no idea. Just same as John Shirley and some of the scripts that he's written for that I've absolutely loved. Like
3 O'Clock High was a wild experience because thank you. I mean, I'm really proud of 3 O'Clock High. And, it was written on spec. I wrote it with my friend Tom Solacey. And, our agents at the time were sort of flummoxed, like, what are you going to do with this thing? I don't think it's not that they didn't like it, but they just didn't know what to do, and they couldn't figure it out. And we had ended up, this is just a slight little off ramp if you want to hear the story. We had ended up writing for Amazing Stories, and Stephen really loved the scripts that we did, and then asked us to rewrite a film called Harry and the Hendersons, which was about right the Yeti. And so he was really happy with that. And then he said, what else you guys got going, And we had just finished this script, which was called After School, because that was always what guys would say, I'll meet you after school. Those were the two words you didn't want to hear. And we told him, and we said, our agents had already sent it to his production company, Amblin, and they had rejected it. So we told him, and he said, oh, I like the sound of that, because he had been picked on when he was a kid. He's a short, he was very slight. And he was, I think, maybe in Texas, I don't know, but he was, one of the few Jews, and for hundreds of miles. So he was getting picked on all the time. And he read it overnight, and he said, "Let's do it." And so suddenly, we were the bells of the ball, and everybody wanted to be in business and do this and do that. And so it was one of the earliest experiences. I was telling somebody yesterday, another writer friend of mine, that there's a tightrope that one must master between not paying attention to anybody's criticisms or indifference to something, and also not being deaf to it. There has to be, because that will be there for all of us always. But with Duel, they were forever telling my father, that's not a movie. That is not a movie. They would say, well, why is the truck driver? What's his problem? Was he pissed? Did the guy in the car have an affair with the truck driver? They were looking for this kind of linear bullshit, and I mean, it's not bullshit. It's just that there are stories where you just don't need it.
It's
You
Hollywood.
just don't need it. It's just superfluous, you know? So ultimately, same, there's Spielberg again, right? Falls into his hands. He was 22 years old or something. And lo and behold, fantastic movie.
Yeah.
So yeah, so part of doing it, certainly maybe more in the film and television business, is a level of persistence that is almost superhuman. You know, and I have had many friends who were talented, really genuinely talented, who just left the business because it was too heartbreaking for them.
Yeah.
You know, something would get really close to going into production, and then it would go up in smoke, and they just couldn't reconcile that, and it was too hurtful to them, too damaging to them, so they left.
Yeah, it seems like
Yeah.
to make it with movies in any capacity, let alone writing. I mean, it's forget having a rhinoceros skin. You've got a
Yeah, I think the key to it is it's tricky because we're all sensitive. I mean, to be a writer, actors have, you know, go through it at a horrible level because they're also being judged for what they look like and their age. But it's the trick, and it's more than a trick. It's a mindset that you have to cultivate, is to not take it personally, but to also not be oblivious to it. So that to try, and so the trick to it, it's almost like, it's like high level jujitsu, is trying to turn the thing around by letting the other person know that you're very interested in what they think, and then trying to convert the energy. It's like a, yeah, like a, you know, it's like a mind trick. What is that?
and
The Jedi mind thing, right? You know, the
it's
Jedi
like
mind. Yeah.
little pocket Yoda when you go into these meetings.
Yeah, well, most of the people in Hollywood are trying. They are emitting a signal. They're emitting their signal, right? And if you become receptive, and you're able to really understand it, you can save many things that would appear to be doomed. And so, in the, you know, over the years, you know, I mean, with all the shows I've written and produced and films and stuff like that, I can remember many occasions where there were moments where, you know, it's like a relationship, you know, where somebody just gets pissed off and, well, I'm out of here, you know, as
Right.
opposed to, tell me why you feel like that. Tell me, how can we try to understand one another better? You know, it is a legitimate effort to get on the other person's wavelength, and
Yeah.
not let your own either agenda or hubris doom the whole thing.
Absolutely, and it sounds like that's just it for any kind of successful life endeavor. I find too. It's
Absolutely, it begins with all human relationships, you know, so listening is a big deal.
yeah, 100%. And speaking of which, too, I guess to kind of piggyback off of my last question, as far as collaborations go,
Yeah.
I understand. Following you on social media as well, or standard. You kind of put up a little teaser of a picture with you working diligently with Joe Dante, who's happens to be a fantastic screenwriter as well in his own right. That I know
Mm,
he's got a bunch of my favorite films are out there too, like the Gremlins, Explorers, The Howling,
mm,
like yourself. The list goes
yeah,
on.
yeah.
Is there anything you can discuss about that? About maybe what the two of you might have been working on?
I've seen that picture. I think that picture, there was a series that was done. Roger Corman had worked with Joe a lot. Joe had been an editor for Roger
Okay.
Corman. And I knew Roger my whole life. I mean, I've got pictures when I was a little boy on the set of the Poe movies. And there's Roger, you know, who was, by the way, at the time, he was directing 2 or 3 movies at the same time in a soundstage. So he'd come
Okay.
over and say, "Hi, how you doing?" And then he's, "Well, I gotta go." And then he was going across the soundstage to do the setup on the second film he was doing. And he was doing at least 2 of them simultaneously. It was like, oh my God, Roger. So
I can't even
he,
chew gum and walk at the same time.
I mean, what a great guy. So he came to Joe and to me and said, "I want to do Netflix wants to do a show." This before Netflix had ever done a show. And he had this idea about a will was going to be read by this very famous rock and roll star that killed himself. and all these different people, these denizens of his life, some of whom were true blue and some of whom were, you know, deceitful, were there, and it was going to be a final judgment of their behaviors, you know. And so part of what happened was the way it was constructed, Netflix bought it, and the way it was constructed, it's called Splatter. And the ending of every episode, I think there were 13 episodes, the viewers would call in or write in and say, this is the person that we think should die. Because some of them, you know, because they're right. So for 13 episodes, there had to be like 40 different endings, if you think about the math of it. And so Joe and I were like, can't we just pretend that we know who the viewers wanted to have die? You know, I mean, nobody's going to check to see who called it. And Roger was, no, we can't do that. So we had an illicit impulse that got shot down. But ultimately, I wrote all the episodes. Joe directed all the episodes, and I think that was on the set. It was up at this crazy mansion up in the Hollywood Hills. We later got together through our pal Mick Garris, who we've both known for decades, you know, and we had done Masters of Horror. Joe had directed, I think, at least one, maybe more. I've written 3 of them. Toby Hooper directed 2. And then Mick was doing this thing called Nightmare Cinema, which was this anthology film. And he said he and Joe had wanted me to come aboard. And I said, yeah, great. So Joe and I talked, and I came up with a few different ideas that I thought would be cool. And so we picked one, and that's what happened. But he's, you know, I have great admiration for his talent. He's a hell of a guy. I mean, you know, he's and what a body of work.
No kidding, yeah. And like, I mean, even just a few of the movies that I mentioned, I mean, this is stuff that kind of shaped my own love for horror and the fantastic as well growing up. I mean, even the one that I mentioned, The Explorers, I can remember, you know, watching, I think I read the book first. My
Oh,
mom was
okay.
always incredible. She's the one that really fostered my love for reading and movies and that too, and filled my bookshelf with books all the time. And that was one of the books that I got, and it was this little picture book of the explorers, and I can remember reading through that, and then of course watching the movie, and just the, you know, the imagination that went behind that was just, you know, fueled my little, I don't know how old I was when I first came across that one, maybe 10, 11, thereabouts, when I was at the ripe old age to have all this stuff kind of shape my interest and things that I would seek out later in life. That was, you know, that
You
was
were
definitely
blessed. You were blessed to have a mother that brought all that in for you, you know. You know, I was going to
100%.
say before I forget, in the same way we were celebrating William Hurt, it just popped into my head. We got so lucky on the Nightmare Cinema episode. It's called Mirari, about this evil plastic surgeon, and we got out of retirement. I mean, he hadn't worked he just didn't want it. He lived in Hawaii. He was just, you know, kicking back and enjoying his life. We got Richard Chamberlain, who looks, you know, he not only looks perfect. I mean, he may be 90 years old. I mean, it's shocking when you look at him. He's so handsome, and he's got. Well, the other thing that I loved about him, and I think he came out because he liked the script. He believed in Joe. I think Nick, I'm sure, was very charming, but he's got this beautiful voice like that, you know, where you just kind of feel reassured no matter what he's telling you. And so he was as perfect in Mirari as Hurt was in Battleground. So we were really blessed to get him.
Yeah, that is awesome. Yeah, there's certain people that have that tonality to them that, I mean, I think Sean Connery was probably one of those guys as well, where he could tell you, you know, whoops, we're all about to die here now, and you would die with absolute confidence.
Well, you know, it's interesting to think of when people talk about casting, how much does casting matter? Think about the Bond movies. You know, each Bond is valid, in each actor who played Bond is valid in their own way. Some people love Daniel Craig. They think he's closest to it, you know, with the Fleming had in mind. Definitely. I think damn near everybody though prefers Sean Connery. I think, you know, he was the penultimate James Bond, and so does casting make a difference? Oh, it's huge. It makes a huge difference.
100%.
Huge difference. Huge difference.
Even
And
go
you
back
can
to
take a role that's kind of, okay. Here's a good example. If you want to go back to Easy Rider, Jack Nicholson playing that small town guy. I mean, that was a breakout star-making performance. And if you'd given that to another good actor, it just wouldn't have been the same thing. But he was just, God, he was funny and incandescent, and that smile of his, I mean, he was a star. He was a star. And that film completely made everybody sort of go, yeah, this guy's a star. And it all kind of like went from there.
And as far as, I mean, some of the stuff that you're working on yourself, RC,
Yeah.
is there anything in particular that, as far as the solo stuff goes, that you might have? I mean, I know you've always got something in the pipeline, but is there anything that you've got in the pipeline now, either screenwriting wise, or literature wise, that we can look forward to?
Well, yeah, I'll tell you a few things. I've got 2 new short story collections that I'm going to be bringing out. One may be published this year. I think you and I think of sort of, we've talked about that previously. Yeah, but COVID has kind of thrown everybody for a loop, I think, in every way, right? So
Every which way.
yeah, and I've got foreign editions coming out of my first collection, Scars, and my second one, Dystopia, in Italy, Spain. I did a count the other day because I was losing track. I believe there are 15 anthologies coming out. Some, at least 2, who are edited by like Ellen Datlow and Stephen Jones, 2 of my longtime friends, and just such astute editors. But I've got, I think it's close to 15 anthologies, or I've got new stories coming out, which kind of blew my mind. I was trying to keep track of it all, but there you go. And then there's going to be foreign editions of things coming out. I've finished a new novel that I'm ready to show. And I've got films and TV stuff. Most of which I can't talk about because it's just too early to talk. What I can talk about is I'm doing a 6-hour Stephen King limited series that I'm adapting and producing, and so that one I can't tell you what the title is, but I'm excited about that. Of course, excited about that. The other editor, by the way, is Alessandro Manzetti, who is this really excellent Italian author, but he has his own publishing company. He's like a force of nature, this guy. And then, musically wise, so I tell you the titles, but it's all like top secret, so you can't talk about certain things. But the album I'm doing with PG Sturgis is called Fool's School, and so we're just about done with that. And we're hoping
very
to
cool.
get that out to people by end of the year maybe would be cool.
Cool. And where's the best place to get updates for this sort of stuff so that we can get a hold of it at the first opportunity?
I think. I don't really have like an active, updated, vibrant website like some people do. I probably should. I just don't. I don't. I mean, I think it's kind of stupid that I don't. But
too busy making all this stuff.
I don't know. You know what? It's just sort of not my natural tendency to go online and do all that kind of stuff. So when something comes out, I'll usually post it or something. But maybe I'll look into doing like a cool website. I got to find somebody to help me do it. So,
that's the thing. Yeah. Well, I know I'll definitely. I can't design a website for you, but I can scream real loud.
Okay.
Just look forward to it.
Yeah.
So again, I really appreciate your time here, and I will respect, of course, the fact that you can only give out so many teasers without any of the details. I'm sure everybody that is watching this right now probably wants to ask all the questions about that I do to kind of tear things down and try to find out what it is that you're working on. Certainly in the Stephen King universe, your own novel, all that good stuff. But like everybody else, we'll wait until there's.
I gotta go battleground on you, man. Going battleground on you. So,
going battleground. That's good.
Yeah. Well, by the way, let me take a moment, if I may, to embarrass you, Rick, to talk about your new book. And, I'm very, very proud to be part of it. And, just what a great interviewer you have been, and the pieces that you write. And so, I hope people take the time to order the book, because it's, I haven't seen the physical copy of it, but I know what's in there, and I know what you bring to it. So they would be wise to order it.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, and I
Yeah.
really appreciate sharing some of that the spotlight on me. So again, thank you. That just goes
Well,
back
you
to
got the mojo. You got the mojo, man. That people should
I appreciate it,
check
and
check
of
you out.
course,
Check you out.
great interview with you in there as well, and great. I actually covered a amazing collection as well, an anthology regarding your dad's work,
Yeah,
tribute to
yeah.
brothers,
Brothers in arms.
which is, and of course your friend Dave Scow and
Yeah.
companies in there as well, and that was just a great.
You know who I approached? I met him at a mutual friend's house. And I've been a drummer, my whole life, right? And so one of my great influences happens to be at this party, and that was John Densmore from The Doors, who is the nicest guy, very socially minded, very politically minded. He and John should get to know each other. And just very gracious and very down to earth, and I had a chance to tell him, how much of an impact he made on me as a musician, because I blend jazz and rock, and that was John's sort of
Okay.
feel. He blended those two things in a really great way. Turns out John's also a writer, and he's written about the Doors, and he writes lots of different articles. And I said, hey, I know you don't like war. Do you want to think about writing a short story? And so he's in the book. And then I also reached out to Roseanne Cash, who's also a wonderful writer, wonderful prose writer, and she's got a piece in there. And, so it's an interesting book, Brothers in Arms.
Yeah, very
And
really,
David Scow, and all kinds of really super talented people.
and of course you've got a great one in there too, Shrapnel.
Yeah, you know what? Shrapnel just got picked up to be in what is it? In Best New Horror.
Okay.
Steve Jones just picked it up, and I was like,
Doesn't
yeah,
surprise me.
yeah.
And so
I see somebody. I see a person. Is that a person?
it is. It's my little person.
Hello there, person. Okay.
That is my partner in crime, Jesse, and this is.
Oh, hi. Oh my goodness, look at this. Oh, it's a family affair. My gosh.
Exactly.
How nice.
It's a real interview.
Yeah, it's a real interview. It's the real McCoy. Salt of the
Exactly.
earth.
In case you
Yeah.
thought it was just the Max Headroom kind of floating head here on it.
Yeah, like an avatar or like a blue screen. You're not a blue screen guy.
No, nope, I'm not. Not even the green screen.
Yeah.
So I guess, RC, if you don't mind, to kind of wrap things up here, then
Yeah,
was there
definitely. I think
we missed out on, or anything you wanted to add, or any pearls of wisdom or life advice through our crazy
Well,
times?
you know what? I'll give you the advice I give. I try to give everybody, which is whatever stage of life you're at, try to play a musical instrument. It's very good for the soul. It's good for the soul. Pick up a pair of bongos, pick up a guitar, something you can that sounds reasonably good fast, so that you don't sort of go, oh, you don't, don't pick violin, and it's good for you. It's good for you. It has a unifying sort of an effect, I think, on our feelings and our mind, and it's I think creatively it's a great oddly it's kind of a muse in its own way.
Absolutely. And you see, I believe in the magic of fate as well. So there's a
Yeah.
reason that I decided to have the family come in here, being that you mentioned that, because I happen to have a harmonica sitting on my my bookshelf.
Well, there you are. That qualifies.
I've been encouraged to not practice. So
well, keep at it secretly. Keep at it secretly. Go sit in the car somewhere. Yeah.
There's a great podcaster who teaches how to play the harmonica, and every time you see him, he does the entire podcast, according to him, in the confines of his pickup truck down the block from where he lives.
Yeah. Oh my God. Well, I always feel bad for parents who have kids that start on violin. I mean, that's violin played badly is excruciating. But what's interesting. I mean, drums in particular, but I would say the same thing about piano and guitar. Drums include, of course, your feet, doing the bass drum and the hi-hat, but it's good to appreciate that we are symmetrical. We are symmetrical beings, and certainly that is recognized in acupressure and acupuncture. You know, you can look at the grid. And so to play an instrument is not just the musical expression of it or the technique of it, it's also that you are doing something that brings symmetry to you, that recognizes and reinforces the symmetry of your own energy fields. It sounds sort of like, you know, nonsense, but I don't think so. I think it's the same thing that feels good when you go for a walk.
Yeah, it doesn't sound nonsense at all to me.
It's just this, right? It's the balance of things. And so with drumming, it's remarkable because you're balancing from all four limbs. It's a balancing experience.
Yeah, it really is. I remember it's funny you mentioned that because I know when way back in elementary school, I started playing the drums a bit when I was in grade 7, I guess it would have been. And then I switched over schools and they already had a drummer. And I picked up the last remaining instrument, which was a baritone, I believe. I want to say the tuba, but it was a smaller version. So I guess the baritone.
Sousaphone.
Was that what it would have been?
Yeah, sousaphone. Yeah.
And unfortunately, the school that I went to as well, they'd already been writing music and all that kind of stuff as well for, I think since grade 1, where I came from a school that started it in junior high school. So it was funny because I was already about 4 years behind in trying to read music, but of course I still had to show up on exam day and show that I could play this instrument. So I used to go home and I would take this thing, I would practice.
Oh my God. The tuba or the sousaphone? Whew, that's a big instrument.
It is, and I never, to this day, I still don't know how to read music, but what I would do is I would basically, all the different notes, I would write down the finger positions for each one, and then I would just kind of copy and copy until I memorized it, the finger positions. But even in that act of doing that, it was still kind of cool because I mean, I'm sure I did horrible in all my exams. I don't remember. There's probably a reason for that. Teacher probably remembers.
Well, it's almost better than reading music because you're actually sort of doing the notation yourself. And that's a tough instrument to be that age, and it's hard to meet girls when you play tuba. You know?
Yeah, I don't know.
It's not a sexy. It's not a cool, sexy affair with a tuba. But,
no, it isn't. But I think it gave me some good muscle tone while I was carrying that sucker.
Probably
around.
some good. You got good lungs. You got to have good lungs to play a tuba.
You know? Exactly.
I mean, they're like the size of hippopotami. Those tubas. So it's so funny to see. Like I remember guys carrying them. They have cases.
Oh yeah.
For tubas, so that's even bigger than the tuba. It's like you're carrying a Jeep. You know, they're so huge. Yeah. You know, and but I think the balance is a big part of it. You know, that you're the neurology of your own creation is coming out of you. It's coming out of you, but it's coming out in a balanced way, and that's part of why I think it's important to play an instrument.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the one thing I liked about it too, is it's very, I guess there's a lot of relationships to music and to math as well, where there's a lot of the timing in it and a lot of
totally. You know, it's interesting, so many drummers or so many comedy writers, I should say, and major comedians are drummers. You'd be shocked. I mean, if I went down the list, you'd go, no, come on, you're kidding. It's it's an endless list of major comedians, talk show hosts, and comedy writers that are drummers.
Never drew that correlation, but that's fascinating.
It's rhythm. It's all about. I mean, a joke is almost like an algebraic equation in a way. You know, you put a word in, it's funny. You take a word out. The jokes are fascinating all by themselves. It's algebra, and I mean, it has to have an inspired thought behind it. But if you don't say it the right way, just the right way, it kills it. You know, and so it's about timing. Yes, when do you say it? But it's timing also. How do you say it? What's the exact phrasing of it? So you can see where drummers and comedians, people that are dealing with jokes, it's a very similar thing. It's rhythmic, man. It's so rhythmic. I mean, I've written a ton of comedy in my life, and when I realized how many other people are drummers, I was like, wow, amazing.
Well, I know, you know, even when I think back to, say, guys that they should never have made it big as a comedian, I'm thinking of, first guy comes to mind is Rodney Dangerfield.
Yeah.
he would get up there and he would just basically all of his jokes were
Boom,
just these
boom, 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 boom,
one-liners,
boom.
but he would do it in such a way where there was this
Henny Youngman. I mean, Henny Youngman was really, he was a real Catskills. He was from a whole different era, but those jokes were like
sorry?
little itty bitty works of art, you know. Mechanic goes to the psychiatrist. Psychiatrist says, "Get under the couch." If he said a mechanic goes to see a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist says, "Well, why don't you get under the couch?" It kills the whole thing. So it's trimming it down. So it's like boom, and so drummers understand that because you only have so much time to work with in a song. I don't know if you knew I had studied with Ginger Baker from Cream. He was my.
I didn't know that. No.
Yeah. I studied one-on-one with him. That's a whole other story. I'll tell you sometime. Interesting guy, nice to me, but a very interesting character. But what we came to understand is that with drumming, no matter what you're doing, where you put the fill, what the fill is, you just always have to know where one is. You can never lose track of one. So you can depart. You can embellish, you can do whatever you want, but you always got to know. It's like, it's like Dorothy. I want to go home,
You've always got your reset button, I guess. Your
You got to come back to the groove. That's one. It's sort of an odd little metaphor for life, maybe.
You just took the words out of my mouth. I was just going to say, you're throwing all these amazing stories that are such metaphors for life. I mean, I don't know how many times things have been so challenging in various things, either personally or professionally, and it's just go back to the basics, hit that reset button, know what your base.
It is. There is great salvation and healing in simplicity.
100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And complication, it does not equate to depth or quality.
That's true. That's why I can definitely get behind the minimalistic movement, even if I can't say it properly for the first time.
That's okay. If I had changed that for you, I would have just taken your dialogue out completely. That's how minimalistic we can do it.
I need some shoes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks very much again, RC.
My pleasure.
But I'm sure that there's a lot here for Cemetery Dance viewers to digest, and I think you've opened up a whole nice little box full of things that people can now also enjoy being on the edge of their seats unpacking for quite some time to come. So
cool.
I really appreciate it.
Cool.
And for everybody out there too, I hope that they certainly picked up on a lot of the work that you've done, as well as John Shirley's, and that they get out there and pick up your work as well as John Shirley's. And I apologize, RC, I should have a bunch of your books within reach here, but they're all in my bookshelf, but they're out there.
No, it's cool. It's okay. It's okay. Well, be well. It's great to spend the afternoon with you.
Yeah, you as well. Thanks again, RC.
Okay, pal. I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah.
Bye.